back to our continued series on the glories of Sri Vrindavan Dham. I'm very happy to be with you today. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashtata Deshatarine. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, in our last few lectures, we covered the pastimes of both Madan Mohan and Govindaji, the two of the three most prominent deities in Vrindavan. So I thought today we would discuss the third deity, Gopinath, as well as his loving servant, Madhu Pandit Goswami. I found that another name of Madhu Pandit Goswami is Sri Gopinath Adhikari. Sri Gopinath Adhikari. Scholars say that Adhikari is a formal term meaning, quote, appointed executive, unquote. And they say in devotee terms that means, quote, an appointed servant. So Sri Gopinath Adhikari means Madhu Pandit Goswami, who is an appointed servant of our beloved Gopinath. Now, according to some accounts, it was Madhu Pandit Goswami who discovered the deity of Gopinath 500 years ago, after he had been hidden in Vrindavan for, 5,000 years, like Madan Mohan and Govindaji. Of course, Gopinath was carved on the order of Brajanab, the great grandson of Krishna, after the Lord had left this world. But again, he disappeared in time. Now, after Gopinath's discovery in Vrindavan 500 years ago, Madhu Pandit accepted him as his Ishtadev, Prandanahe, and worshipped him throughout the rest of his life. So I thought it would be appropriate today to begin by learning more about Madhu Pandit Goswami. Because as we all know, we approach the Lord through his devotees. As Krishna states in the Adi Purana, Yeme bhakta jana partha, name bhaktas chate jana. Bad bhakta nam chaye bhaktas, teme bhakta tama mataha. Quote, my dear Partha, those who say they are my devotees are not my devotees, but those who claim to be the devotees of my devotees are actually my devotees, unquote. So in my research for this particular lecture, I was very fortunate to actually come across the prana mantra of Madhu Pandit Goswami. I didn't know there was a prana mantra for Madhu Pandit Goswami. But I found it in the Shakanir Naya Ritam of Yadunath Das, text 34. Madhu Sneha Samayuktam Prema Shaktam Maha Sayam Vrindavani Rasa Ratam Bande Shri Madhu Panditam. So beautiful. Quote, I pay obeisances to Sri Madhu Pandit Goswami, the great personality who was attached to Krishna Prema, who was endowed with affection as sweet as honey, and is engaged in meditations upon Rasa Leela in Vrindavan. Such a wonderful prana mantra. So, in Krishna Leela, in the spiritual world, Madhu Pandit Goswami is the Gopi Mandali Saki, who is part of the group of Champakalata Saki. However, when she appeared on this earth planet to participate in Mahaprabhu's pastimes as Madhu Pandit Goswami, there's no information about where he took his birth or when he took his birth, or even very much about his childhood. But we do know that he resided for some time in Kadadaha, Bengal. That much I could ascertain. And as a young man, he also spent time in Jagannath Puri. And it is there that he took initiation from Gadadhar Pandit. Gadadhar Pandit's famous as a great Gaudiya Vaishnava scholar. And under his direction, his tutelage, Madhu Pandit Goswami also became very learned. It's said that he mastered the 18,000 shlokas of Srimad Bhagavatam. And consequently, like his guru, he was awarded the title of Pandita or Pandit, Madhu Pandit Goswami. What's that saying? Like father, like son. So when he was in Puri, Madhu Pandit Goswami heard about the qualities and the form and pastimes of Sri Krishna, and knowing very well that Krishna always lives in Vrindavan, he asked his guru's permission to go there. Now, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we hear that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had told Gadadhar Pandit to stay in Puri. So he was never able to go to Vrindavan. But when his disciple, Madhu Pandit Goswami, requested permission to go, he was very happy to give him that permission. And with his blessings, he left for Braja. Actually, he was a young man. I read that he was around 14 years of age when he arrived in Vrindavan. So scholars say that upon arriving Vrindavan, he immediately wandered through the 12 forests of Braj. And it's described that he was expecting to see Krishna at any moment. But, quote, the acharyas say, quote, the superior principle of service and separation dictated that he would not. The superior principle of service and separation dictated that he would not see Krishna. So essentially what this means is that service and separation is higher than meeting Krishna. And we've discussed this a number of times the last few months. Basically that separation makes the heart grow fonder. So there's two, because I was researching a lot, I came across two very beautiful verses that highlight this principle of, serving Krishna in separation, that it's better. And the first verse I found, of course, is in Srila Rupa Goswami's Padyavali, text 240. It's a very, very beautiful verse. This is Radharani speaking. She says, quote, separation from Krishna is better than meeting him. When I meet him, there is only one Krishna. But when I am separated from him, the three worlds become filled with Krishnas. Radharani. And the second verse I found is Krishna speaking. And that's in Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's Ananda Chandrika commentary to Ujjvala Nilamani, 15.3. Krishna speaking, quote, if I had to choose between union and separation, I would prefer separation for my beloved, because in union I see her only in one place, whereas in separation my entire universe is filled with her. So very similar quotes, one from Radha and one from Krishna, confirming that separation is higher than meeting. But of course, Krishna is very kind to those devotees who want to be with him. No harm. Actually, those devotees who are separated, they also meet Krishna. And the separation makes the meeting even nicer, the union. So Krishna is very kind to those who desire to be with him. If Krishna sees a pure devotee has such a desire, then he'll make the arrangements to appear before him. Of course, if a devotee shows more interest in material life than Krishna consciousness, I guess you could say that devotee has to wait to see Krishna. Vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sadurlabhaha. In the Gita, Krishna says, after many, many births of purification, eventually a devotee can see me or be with me, or I'm to be understood. Vasudeva sarvamiti samahatma sadurlabha. Of course, if one is a little sincere, or sincere but not yet a pure devotee, we hear that sometimes Krishna appears before such a devotee briefly to inspire him on selected occasions, to inspire him to become a pure devotee. Just like the Lord appeared to a very young Narada Muni. Narada Muni had left home as a 5-year-old boy. He'd gone to the forest to find Krishna. You know, he wasn't, quote unquote, perfected. This is a Leela, of course. But Krishna appeared and then disappeared. How is that so? That's nicely described in the first canto of Bhagavatam, chapter 6, verse 21. Krishna's, he's appeared to Narada, the young boy, and he's starting to disappear. So what does he say to Narada? "O Narada, I regret that during this lifetime you will not be able to see me anymore. Those who are incomplete in service and who are not completely free from all material taints can hardly see me." He was sincere, but something a little lacking, but Krishna was very kind. He appeared and gave him, but not for very long. But for a pure devotee, the Lord can appear before him at any time. In fact, we can say the Lord is always with every devotee who's wise enough to be chanting Sri Krishna's holy names. We may not be able to see him, but we know he's always with us because Nama Chintamani Krishna's Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha. There is no difference between the name of Krishna and Krishna. And Prabhupada said poetically one time, when you chant Hare Krishna, Krishna's chanting, Krishna's dancing on the tip of your tongue. He's dancing on the tip of your tongue. So that Krishna's always with the chanter, that was very nicely stated by the great saint Tukaram. And we should take his words to heart. It's so beautiful what he said. It's one of my favorite statements in Krishna consciousness, Tukaram. Tukaram wrote, "If you're lying down and chanting, the Lord will come and sit with you. And if you're sitting and chanting, the Lord will come and stand next to you. And if you're standing and chanting, the Lord will come and dance with you. And if you're dancing and chanting, the Lord will embrace you." Wow. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Can't see him yet, but I'll keep chanting him. Hopefully one day I will, with purification. So we're speaking about Madhu Pandit Goswami, who's of that caliber of a pure devotee, looking everywhere for Krishna in the 12 forests of Vrindavan, obviously feeling so much intense separation. So finally Krishna came to him. He came to him in the form of Gopinath. And there's actually two accounts how the deity of Gopinath came to Madhu Pandit Goswami. In one account, his very, very close friend in Vrindavan, his name was Paramananda Bhatta, or sometimes Paramananda Goswami. It's described that he found the deity. Whereas in another account, we hear how Madhu Pandit found Gopinath. So the first account, it describes Paramananda Goswami found that deity. So I was really curious, who's Paramananda Goswami? I'd never heard very much about him. And again, so fortunate, seek and ye shall find. I came across his prana mantra as well. Yes. It's also from the same Shastra. Shakanir Nayam Ritam of Yadunath Das. This time it's text 25. Bande Shri Paramanandam Bhakta Charyam Rasa Priyam Radha Govinda Gauranga Gadadhara Pada Pradam. Quote, I offer my obeisances to Sri Paramananda Bhattacharya, who loves Bhakti Rasa and who bestows the feet of Radha Govinda Gauranga and Gadadhara. He bestows, he delivers, he gives the feet of Radha Govinda Gauranga and Gadadhara. So I was reading that Paramananda Goswami, he was also a disciple of Gadadhar Pandit. So he and Madhu Pandit were godbrothers. And there's another book I came across, authorized book, called the Gaudiya Vaishnav Abhidhana. The Gaudiya Vaishnav Abhidhana. And therein it says that Sri Paramananda Bhatta, is described there as Bhatta, resided in Vrindavan for a long time. And, listen to this, he taught many of the Bhakti Shastras to our books, to Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Sanatana Goswami. What an elevated saint he must have been. He explained the Bhakti Shastras to Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. That's in the scripture, Gaudiya Vaishnav Abhidhana. So, I was also reading that many scholars say that he commentated on a number of scriptures, and he's well known for a Sanskrit commentary he did on the Kavya Prakasha. The Kavya Prakasha, those of you who are scholars, you'll know that that's the most celebrated book on Sanskrit poetics. Yes. So according to historical records, Paramananda Goswami and Madhu Pandit Goswami, friends, godbrothers, they stayed together most often at Vamsivat in Vrindavan, in their deep relationship. Of course, we know Vamsivat. Vamsivat is where Krishna goes at nighttime into the forest, and he plays his venu, he plays his flute, and he calls the gopis to come running from their homes late at night. And they have rasa dance, rasa lila. So Vamsivat's a very, very sacred place. So that's where they lived. Now, the first version of finding the Gopinatha deity with Paramananda Goswami is that one year, during the rainy season, the rain was so intense that the Jamuna River just swelled up and overflowed, and it forcefully uprooted the banyan tree, because Vamsivat Vata means banyan, actually, a banyan tree. Vamsi means flute. So the tree of the flute, literally translated. So that famous banyan tree, under which Krishna would play his flute, it became uprooted due to the flooding. So Paramananda Goswami, he took a branch of that tree, because banyan trees are very unusual. They grow up, and then the branches come down, and they become roots for the next tree to come up. It's a banyan tree phenomena. So the tree had fallen over, so he took a branch, and then he was going to plant that in the ground so the tree could grow again. And as he was digging the earth, lo and behold, there was Gopinath after 5,000 years at Vamsivat. So he had that deity excavated, and he gave it, he entrusted the deity and the worship to his friend, Madhu Pandit Goswami. We read in Upanishadamrita that one of the 6 processes of devotional service is to exchange gifts. So what a gift he gave to his friend Madhu Pandit Goswami. And as I said earlier, Madhu Pandit Goswami took that deity as his Ishtadeva. And he eventually inspired a wealthy person to construct a temple just behind Vamsivat. I'll tell a little bit about that very soon. So that's the first version. Now, the second version is that due to intense love, Madhu Pandit Goswami's wandering around Braja again, looking for Krishna. And one day in his wanderings, he came to Vamsivat, or he came back to Vamsivat, let's say, and in his ecstasy of looking for Krishna, he fell unconscious there at Vamsivat. And Krishna, seeing his intense desire for union with him, for meeting him, Krishna appeared. Krishna personally appeared before Madhu Pandit. Govindam Adipurusham Tamam Bhajami. Govindam Adipurusham Tamam Bhajami. There's Krishna moving with his flute. And Madhu Pandit Goswami asked for a benediction from the Lord. He asked that the Lord could remain in his visible form like that in order that he could see him and be with him constantly. But it's very interesting. The Lord replied, quote, "My dear Madhu Pandit Goswami, this constant darshan of me, it's not possible in Kali Yuga," unquote. It's possible in Dwapara Yuga, even for the Asuras. They also got to see Krishna 5,000 years ago. But in Kali Yuga, that type of darshan is not possible. But don't worry, we can also have darshan of the Lord. Kali Kali Nam Rup Krishna Avatar, stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita, that the incarnation of the Lord in this age is the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And of course, the Yuga avatar, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who gave us this chanting. So, the Lord, who's there in his complete form, he said to Madhu Pandit, but I will manifest before you as my murti, as my deity. And then Krishna manifested as the Gopinath murti, the Gopinatha deity. Now some scholars, they say that he manifested, a few meters away in the thickets. And Madhu Pandit looked, and then he went there and he moved the thickets, and there he was standing. Krishna was standing, as we have seen the painting. There's a beautiful painting in Jaipur at the Gopinath temple of Madhu Pandit looking in the forest there, and then there's Gopinath. So that was self-manifested. Same deity, but self-manifested to Madhu Pandit Goswami. What a history we have. As I often say, this is the real history. And fortunately, history repeats itself. And by Srila Prabhupada's grace, we're also somehow part of the Lord's modern-day pastimes, the modern-day pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, further research, I found out that Gopinath's eternal identity is that of a 10-year-old boy. Now, it's very interesting how Gopinath got his temple. I mentioned there that the details of how he got his temple, and also how Radharani joined him, her murti, how she joined him. So first, we'll discuss how he got the temple. So historically, one of Emperor Akbar's generals, we've been speaking quite a lot about Akbar. We don't have to go into too much detail again, but one of Emperor Akbar's generals was again a Rajput king or soldier. His name was Rayashila Shekhawata. It's a good name for somebody. Rayashila Shekhawata. And he was also very courageous in battle. And he won a very important battle for Emperor Akbar. So afterwards, Akbar gave him a huge amount of wealth. And he was a devotee, Rayashila Shekhawata. And on the request of Madhu Pandit Goswami, Rayashila Shekhawata built the first temple of Gopinath in Vrindavan, just next to Vamsivat. Now, I was reading some scholars say that Gopinath's temple was built before Madan Mohan's, Sanatana Goswami's deity, but it's commonly accepted amongst Braj's authorities that Madan Mohan's temple was the first to be completed in Braj. And then later came Gopinath's temple. It's just interesting point there. Unfortunately, some years later, as we were discussing earlier, another lecture, the Emperor Aurangzeb came to power, and he destroyed the original temple of Gopinath. But the present temple that we see now in Vrindavan, because it's the tradition in Vrindavan amongst the sadhus, every morning they visit the 7 principal temples of Vrindavan. In the evening they go back and visit those 7 principal temples. So Gopinath is one of those principal temples. So the present temple we see in Vrindavan was constructed 100 years later after it was destroyed. So it's also very old. And of course, during Aurangzeb's atrocities, Radha and Gopinath made their way to Jaipur in Rajasthan, where they reside today. I say they made their way because devotees took them, but that was their mercy that we could, or they could serve them, serve Radha Gopinath in that way. So they're now in Jaipur, and every time we go to Jaipur with the Parikrama party, we visit Govindaji, then we go to Gopinath around 8 o'clock in the morning, and then we go to Damodar, and so many different deities are there. Now, the next question is, when and how did Radharani, her Murti, join Gopinath in Vrindavan before they were moved to Jaipur? Well, it was actually Janhava-mata, the wife of Lord Nityananda, who sent a deity of Radha to Vrindavan specifically for Gopinath. But it's interesting that when Janhava-mata followed that up with her first visit to Vrindavan, and she took darshan of Gopinath, she was looking at Radha Gopinath, and she saw that the deity of Radharani was kind of small in proportion to Gopinath. And in her mind she was thinking it would have been more appropriate to have sent a bigger deity. She thought, but she didn't say anything to anybody. And she went back to her quarters. And that night, Gopinath himself appeared to her in a dream. And he agreed with her that Radha was too small. And he said, Radharani looks a little somewhat odd by my side. Because he's a big deity. You see him when you go to Jaipur, he's a big deity. So he said, the Radha sounds a little small. So in the dream, Gopinath requested Janhava-mata to arrange for a new deity of Radha to be carved and to be sent. And he said that new deity could be placed on his left, where that small deity was, as usual, and the smaller deity of Radha could go to the right side. So one big Radha, one small Radha, 2 Radhas. So when she woke up, Janhava-mata was a little perplexed, a little confused. She's thinking, 2 Radhas? But the next night, Vrindavaneshwari, Srimati Radharani, appeared to Janhava-mata in a dream. And she confirmed Gopinath's order. She told Janhava-mata not to hesitate, for it was also her desire to have a second deity installed. So Janhava-mata woke up, and immediately she began to arrange for a bigger deity of Radharani to be made, and actually it was in Bengal, and that deity was eventually sent to Vrindavan and installed on Gopinath's left side, where Radharani always stands, and the little deity, the pujaris placed that on Gopinath's right side. Like that. So in this way, two deities of Sri Radha stood beside Gopinath, or stand beside Gopinath. You can see in Jaipur. Now, according to the book Bhaktamala, which we quoted the other day, when Janhava-mata had the second deity of Radharani placed on Krishna's left side, and the smaller deity of Radharani went to the right side. But it said that she said that the smaller deity of Radharani was actually an Anga Manjari, Radharani's sister in Vrindavan pastimes. So she said, no, that's not Radha, that's Ananga Manjari. And it's interesting because who's Ananga Manjari? Well, Janhava-mata. Janhava-mata is an incarnation of Ananga Manjari in Krishna's pastimes. Yeah, it's interesting. How do we know that Janhava-mata is Ananga Manjari in Krishna's pastimes? Because it's said so by Kavi Karnapura in Gora Gunadesha Dipika, verse 66. He writes, quote, some say that Srimati Vasudha Devi, who's the second wife of Lord Nityananda, is the incarnation of Srimati Ananga Manjari. And others say that Srimati Janhava-mata is the incarnation of Ananga Manjari. Then he goes on to say, in truth, both opinions are correct. They are both incarnations of Srimati Ananga Manjari. So, yeah, when you go for darshan, you can say, oh, there's two Radhas next to Gopinath, or we can understand this particular part of Bhaktamala where it says that as we're looking at the deity of Gopinath, there's a little deity on our left, on his right, and that's Ananga Manjari, and on the other side is Sri Radha. Deep. Now, Gopinath's name is very revealing. He is Nath. He's the master of the gopis, Gopinath, of which the zenith of their pastimes is the Rasa Leela dance. Of course, the subject matter of Rasa Leela itself is very deep, and we must approach it with caution. Actually, it's recommended to hear the first 9 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam, wherein we hear the greatness or the grandeur of God, the transcendental nature of God, before we enter into the 10th canto, and especially this part about Krishna's pastimes as Gopinath with his gopis. But we're doing that. In all our centers around the world, every morning, we're going through meticulously the Srimad Bhagavatam, and the result is that all the dirty things in the heart are being purified so that we can properly understand what is Rasa Leela. Of course, it's very interesting that even hearing Rasa Leela itself is a form of purification. Yes. And hearing of Krishna's pastime of Rasa Leela means that one can conquer over material desire and lust. And that's there in the Bhagavatam. 10th canto, chapter 33, text 39, and I quote, anyone who faithfully hears or describes the Lord's playful affairs with the young gopis of Vrindavan will attain the Lord's pure devotional service. Thus he will quickly become sober and conquer lust, the disease of the heart. So it's recommended to hear the Rasa Leela in a humble fashion from authoritative sources, because even that Cheto Darpana Marjanam. It cleanses the heart. So true to his name, Gopinath enjoys pastimes with hundreds and thousands of Lakshmis or gopis, we hear, in Vrindavan. And we have that famous prayer, Shuriman Rasa Rambi Vamsivata Tatashtita Karshan Venu Shvanayar Gopir Gopinath Shriya Stu Naha. Quote, may Gopinath Ji, who attracts all the gopis with the song of his flute and who has begun the most melodious rasa dance on the banks of the river Jamuna at Vamsivat, be merciful upon us. We quote that all the time, and especially in the special ceremonies, initiations. We're doing the fire yajnas, marriages. So the acharyas, they explain that verse. You could say that's almost like the pranam mantra probably is the pranam mantra for Gopinath. So the acharyas have commented on it. And they say that on the banks of the Jamuna in Vrindavan, there's a vata. Vata means banyan, tree named Vamsi Vata. Vamsi is one of Krishna's flutes again. So on the night of the Saradiya Rasa, the Lord comes under this tree and plays beautiful melodies on his flute. And hearing those sounds, the gopis become overwhelmed with love. They're scattered all over Vrindavan. And they leave behind their families and run to Vamsivat to be with Gopinath. And when they arrive, he teases them, he tests them in various ways. What are you doing here in the middle of the night? You should go home. Teasing them. But then he finally invites them into that epic Ras Leela dance. So the acharyas say that since Gopinath has bestowed such good fortune on all these gopis, may he also bestow the same good fortune on all Gaudiya Vaishnavas who worship him in the mood of amorous love, Madhurya Bhav. So we heard therein mention of the Sharadiya Rasa dance that takes place. Now this is the Rasa dance that takes place on the full moon of the Sarat season, which means autumn. And as such, that particular Rasa dance is very much glorified, like the Maharasa dance. And often devotees, they think, there's just one Rasa dance. That is the Rasa dance, the Rasa dance. But actually, there's many Rasa dances at different times of the year and different places as well. I went into it a little bit, and I learned that there's the there's the Nitya Rasa. That's the Rasa dance that takes place every night in Vrindavan. There's the Vashantika Rasa, which takes place on Vashanta Purnima. That's the spring Rasa dance. There's the Kartik Rasa dance that takes place on the full moon of the month of Kartik. And there's the Sharadiya Rasa, that Rasa dance that takes place on the full moon in the autumn. So like that, there's lots of Rasa dances. And a little more detail, in the spring Rasa dance, Radha disappears from Krishna's vision. And in the autumn Rasa dance, Krishna disappears from the gopis as well as Radha's vision. So some details. So that's the, of course so much can be said, but I'm not so qualified, but about Rasa Leela. But there are many such sweet dealings between Gopinath and his gopis. So many dealings. I was just reading last night before I took rest a really very, very sweet pastime, which I think it's appropriate and we can share it now. We're kind of coming to the conclusion here, so we can finish with a nice pastime. And that is, once upon a time, because Prabhupada uses that phrase, Krishna went with the gopis to a small hill. On top of the hill there was a spring. of water. It's described as mineral water that had medicinal properties. So Krishna decided that he would accompany the gopis, and they were very happy for him to accompany them to the top of that hill to get water from their water pitchers. And as the gopis were getting their pitchers filled with water, Krishna said, with a little smile, he said, "Dear girls, you all collect your water. It's taking some time, so I'm going to go for a little walk. I'm going to go for a walk. It's just, you're taking you so there's so many gopis to fill their pitchers. But I'll return very soon, and then when you're finished, I'll walk you home." The gopi said, "Okay." So they're filling and filling and filling, and then, Krishna had left, and then filling, and then, when they'd finished, took some time, they sat down to rest and just basically waited for Krishna to come back. So time passed, and after a while it's described, one gopi asked another, "Do you see him?" They're looking down the road. Do you see him? Can you hear him? So that gopi said, "No, I don't see anything. I don't hear anything." So they all busied themselves for a while. Then after a while, another gopi asked her friend, "Is Krishna coming?" So her friend looked down the road again and said, "No." So more time passed, quite a lot of time passed actually. And all the gopis started getting restless because, as we know, a moment away from Krishna is like a millennium of time for them. So in their restlessness, one gopi, she looked down the road, she said, I think I see him coming. I think I see him coming. Another gopi looked and she said, "That's just a branch hanging over the road, moving in the wind." They're becoming mad in separation from Krishna. Transcendental madness. So a few minutes later, another gopi, she rose to her feet. It's described, she pointed down the road, she said, "That's Krishna for sure. I see him coming." But when the other gopis looked, they answered, "You silly," they said, "you silly girl, that's a peacock crossing the road." So time, again and again it's described that the gopis, they thought they saw Krishna coming, but they were always disappointed because he wasn't coming. So gradually it's described they sank deeper and deeper into sadness. They became desperate. And they were discussing amongst themselves that maybe Krishna's not going to come back. Maybe he's gone somewhere else to be with some other gopis. So the acharyas write at that time, quote, "Their separation and anticipation to see him reached such a height that it pushed the gopis into a state of ecstasy in which they all envisioned Krishna. They all envisioned Krishna. And it's described that at one point, all of them simultaneously, they had a vision of Krishna. It wasn't Krishna, but it was in their minds, or rather they actually saw a vision of Krishna, but all together at the same time. It's so interesting. And when they saw Krishna standing there before him, not really because he's on a walk, but they saw the vision, they all turned away from him, from the vision, and they covered their faces with their veils. It's described a very beautiful scene. They're all standing around, they're in a circle around their, quote, imaginary Krishna. And their backs were turned to him, and their necks were slightly bent, and they were sometimes looking at the vision and making remarks like, "Krishna, why did you say you were coming right back? You were gone such a long time," and they're making all these remarks. And it's also described that to this vision, their eyes were shooting angry arrows for him being so late. So then after some time, Krishna actually came back. He appeared, a few meters away. But it's described the gopis were too absorbed in their ecstatic vision of him to notice that the real Krishna was there. So Krishna kind of, it's described, he took in the scene and he kind of wanted to like, oh, this is interesting. So he came a little bit closer and to witness their ecstasy, just standing a few meters away, listening to one gopi after another, chastising the vision of him for keeping them waiting for so long. And it's described that the gopis, every words were as sweet as nectar to Krishna's ears. But finally he had drunk enough of the girl's ecstatic chastisement, so he took his flute, and to break their trance, he played his flute, beautiful song on his flute, and it brought them back. It brought their attention back to him standing there with his flute, Krishna, the Lord of their hearts. And what did they see? How did they see Krishna? They saw Krishna as Gopinath, standing under a banyan tree, playing his flute, his body bent in 3 places, garlanded with Vajjayanti garland. It means 5 types of flowers going all the way down to his knees, surrounded by bumblebees, tasting the sweet nectar of that garland. His lips red like bimba fruits, his lotus eyes extending all the way to his ears, his black silky hair curling down with the Vajjayanti garland and the beautiful jewel on his chest and peacock feather in his hair. They saw him as Gopinath at Vamsivat. And they all stated in unison, "There's the beloved Lord of our lives, our Pranabhalabha." Like that. So that's the pastime. Simple, but very, very sweet. This is Braj. So, that's what I found in my research over the last few days about Gopinath, about Vamsivat, about Madhu Pandit Goswami, about Paramananda Goswami, etc. I'm happy to have shared that with you. And I think it would be most appropriate today to finish with a beautiful song by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, a song that's very popular in our International Society for Krishna Consciousness, Gopinath. Gopinath. The first time I heard Gopinath was from Vishnu Janhava Maharaj in the early days of the movement. I think there's a recording. He sings it with so much devotion. And actually this song, you could say prayer, by Bhaktivinoda Thakur is in the mood of a sadhaka, an aspiring devotee, aspiring to be one day one of Gopinath's gopis. We've been hearing about all the Nityasiddha gopis and their dealings with Gopinath. But here's a song of a sadhaka desiring to eventually come to that stage. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is singing it in that mood. And it's very, very beautiful. So let's purify our hearts by hearing this song from the heart of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. O Gopinath, Lord of the Gopis, please hear my request. I am a wicked materialist, always addicted to worldly desires, and I possess no good qualities. O Gopinath, you are my only hope, and therefore I have taken shelter at your lotus feet. I am now your eternal servant. O Gopinath, how will you purify me? I do not know what is devotion, and my materialistic mind is always absorbed in fruitive work. I have fallen into this dark and perilous worldly existence. O Gopinath, everything here is your illusory energy. I have no strength or transcendental knowledge, and this body of mine is not free from the control of material nature. O Gopinath, this sinner who is weeping and weeping begs for an eternal place at your divine feet. Please give him your mercy. O Gopinath, you are able to do anything, and therefore you have the power to deliver all sinners. And who is a greater sinner than myself? O Gopinath, you are the ocean of mercy. Having come into this material world, you expand your divine pastimes for the sake of the fallen conditioned souls. O Gopinath, I am so sinful that although all the demons attained your lotus feet, Bhakti Vinod has remained in worldly existence. All glories to Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur. Thank you again for this opportunity. I really enjoyed the research this time, especially finding those 2 prana mantras. That was like, wow, the highlight of my week. And yes, we'll continue with our discussions. We'll keep going deeper, led by the hand of Srila Prabhupada, the revealer of the Dham, into Sri Braja Mandala. So I'll see you, be with you in a couple of days from now with another subject. Haven't decided yet, just have to kind of sit back and think about what we'll discuss, but there's a lot to discuss. Shishi Gauranitai ki, Shishi Krishna Balaram ki, Shishi Radha Shama Sundar ki, Brindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Shishi Radha Gopinath ki, Shri Madhu Pandit Goswami ki, Paramananda Goswami ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Vamsivata ki, Shri Brajabhumi Shri Vrindavan Dhama ki, back home, back to Godhead, Goloka Vrindavan Dham ki, Jai Jai Sri Sri Radhe Shyam. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Prabhupada.